off. I was
Yeah,
like, we're good.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. All right, well, yeah, welcome guys. Welcome back to Building Better by WCP Building Renewal. I'm Stephen Bailey. Today I'm joined by Sean Stevenson from Low Tide Properties. Sean, say hello.
Hey guys.
All right, on man. Well, really appreciate you coming through and spending some time with us this morning. And I know you've kind of come up through the building operations side. Now you obviously play a leadership role overseeing teams and day-to-day performance. So really interesting interview because you've got a lot of strong sort of boots on the ground perspective on what actually makes buildings run well. So today we're going to talk about your journey, what's happened behind the scenes in building operations, and what kind of separates well-run buildings from ones that are seemingly constantly reactive. So, Sean, really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks again for being here.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so let's rewind a little bit here. Let's just I'm curious, how did you first get into building operations?
I lived in New Zealand for a couple of years and moved over there to not be a grown-up anymore and ran a burlesque and freak show bar and a nightclub, some cocktail bars. I was a glazer prior to that. So when I came back, I went back into glazing and quickly realized that it wasn't where I wanted to spend the next 10 or 15 years. And one of my best friends, Isaac, I lived with, was a power engineer and building operator for a local firm in town. And I was Friday after work one day over a beer was griping about working in trades and how I wanted to change. He said they're looking for somebody to hire on that's a bit of a handyman and knows his way around mechanical systems and construction. So he suggested I apply, and I did. From there, I was hired and did my fifth class through that company and
Yeah,
learned a lot. It's a pretty famous building there in Vancouver, Harbor Center. So
yeah,
it was a fun place to work and kind of get my feet wet into the industry.
nice. So was it kind of always the plan, or did you just more so kind of find yourself fall into it a little bit?
50-50. If I'm being
Yeah,
honest, I remember in high school, the high school janitor was a great fella, and he always walked around with that big set of keys. He was the handyman. I grew up in a
yeah,
small town and
yeah,
always kind of looked at him. He was just a sweet guy. Monday to Friday, got to hang out. Obviously liked what he did and didn't look too stressed out. And then coming up through trades, anytime I'd have to go to a building to do some glass work, the building operators were who I'd run into, and they were always kind of these like casual guys, came up through trades. They had a big set of keys and a coffee cup, and they didn't look like they carried a lot of the day-to-day stress with them. And so it always sat in the back of my mind that that might be something I want to transition into once I'm done humping glass up stairwells and hanging off the swing stages. So when
yeah,
the opportunity came up, I was like, well, the Lord hates a coward. I might as well try. And I found I really liked it.
yeah. So I like that. It's so funny you say that. I had a really good relationship with my high school janitor. I'm trying really hard to remember what his name is to give him a quick shout out, but I can't. But so you go back to the early days. So when you think back to the early days of being a building operator, what do you think some of the biggest learning curves would have been?
Oh God, just the overwhelming amount of information that you are expected to have at minimum, base level understanding of.
Yeah,
It was overwhelming. As a glazer, I had to know about glass and how glass worked with certain things. In operations, I had to know how the windows worked with the HVAC, the plumbing worked with the occupants, the fire suppression system worked with the IT closets. There was just so much to take in. And Isaac and a couple of the people I worked with that were a bit more seasoned just told me, it's kind of the adage of how you eat an elephant. It's one bite at a time. You're not
yeah,
going to learn everything all at once. So just pick
yeah.
something, learn about it, pick something new when you feel that you've kind of got a good understanding and just keep ticking over the topics that you come across.
Yeah. So it sounds like you gotta be almost like a jack of all trades, like a Swiss Army knife in a way.
Very much so. And admittedly, I have ADHD, so for me to hop from subject to subject, feels very natural. It's a very natural way of operating for me. So I found that operations actually fit really well with the way my brain worked.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, ADHD is obviously not the easiest thing to live with, but when it comes to having to be a person that's multitasking and needs to have multiple things on the go at all times, it almost feeds into that way of thinking the like quite well, I would think. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it matches. My partner's a nurse and emerge, and we often find that the process in which we navigate and triage things, although the subject matter is very different,
Hmm.
the process and how things go and how you triage problems and how they interact with other issues is very similar. So it's cool to see that the way my brain works also lends itself to being productive and successful in other areas. I just happen to like dealing with mechanical systems more than people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's finding that sort of peace in chaos almost a little bit.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. So, okay, so let's talk about, you've grown with low tide. You went from an operator, now you're in a leadership role, and not everyone makes that jump. So, what do you think allowed you to make that transition successfully from doing the work really to now leading teams?
I will quote a fella, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. It was a leadership training we did with one of our vendors. The fellow's name was Steve, but I cannot remember his last name. But he said, "Who you are gets you further than what you know." And I think who I am as a person has often led me to be successful, whether it's in glazing, in hospitality, and in this, it's just the willingness to say yes to most things. I often don't say no. It's more of a yes, but. And
Mm,
that attitude has led me and put me in positions where people who have the authority and power to promote me or give me opportunities see it as an
hmm.
advantage. So just being kind of easy as she goes and saying yes to things seems to have benefited me very well and allowed me to grow.
Right on. And that, yeah, that actually leads me to a question because there is like that relationship layer, right? And just the personality you have. And I always find it funny because every time I see you at an event, an association event of some sort, you seem to kind of know everybody in the room. So for you, how important are relationships in your role, whether it's tenants, property managers, contractors? Yeah.
It's paramount. Like I mean, effectively, kind of, if you took operations as just a unit, we all do the same thing.
Hmm.
Property management companies all do the same thing. HVAC vendors all do the same thing. What sets you apart or what causes you to stand out or increases the opportunities you get is connection and the
Hmm.
people aspect of it. If you're fun to get along with, if you care about who you're dealing with, and you have a vested interest, you tend to attract really like people. Specifically with some of the industry events like BOMA, I find that mentality is shared throughout the majority of people who attend those.
Hmm.
So it not only makes it easy, but it fosters that attitude of if you create the connection, you get to know people when there's a problem or you're going out to an RFP and you're like, oh, I really like that person. They were easy to talk to, I
Yeah.
want to give them an opportunity because doing business with them seems like it would be more cohesive, less combative, and
Yeah.
probably more fun.
Yeah, well, and you nailed it because depending on how complex a project may be, whether it's, a small maintenance project or like a larger scale, capital project, there's going to be issues along the way. So if you're in that situation with someone that you like, you trust, you've been there before, coming to a resolution is going to be so much easier, right? And we're pushing quite hard, trying to have conversations and some of the lunch and learns that we're doing that whether it's us or another contractor, don't look at them as a vendor, look at them as a partner and bring them in as early as possible because having their perspective, it now becomes a joint solution as opposed to, hey, we've identified this problem, provide us a quote. It's like, okay, well, now we got to go 3 steps back to really kind of get to the root of what's going on here, right? So,
Absolutely.
yeah. So going back, you spent years actually in the buildings dealing with issues sort of day to day. So, what are sort of some of the things that can happen behind the scenes in building operations that owners or tenants just would never see, but are critical to keeping a building running well?
Holding your sub trades accountable. And when I say that, I don't mean like holding their feet to the fire, but like being invested in the project with them, often in buildings that are either understaffed or might be a little lighter on how they spend their money. If you don't have the operations, the PMs, like property managers, project managers, and asset managers invested in how your trades are working in the projects, things get missed and they
Mm,
often don't get discovered until something goes wrong. Um, that's kind of the biggest thing that I try to encourage people that I work with and people I talk to is like check in with them, bring them coffee, look at what they're doing and ask questions. Most of the people who are in trades enjoy teaching. It's a
mm,
critical part of trades. They're tradesmen, they're apprenticeships. They enjoy learning and exchanging information, and good ones will do that. So capitalizing on that characteristic and being fully informed of what's going on, problems that can arise, and taking information
hmm
from the people closest to the source generally mitigates those downstream problems, saves you money, reduces headaches with tenants, and it's that
hmm
like ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. If the second year apprentice is working and he's doing a plumbing stack and he goes, "Oh man, this might get in your way later on," like, you should take his word for it. You should investigate that. Like he knows that better than you do, and he's seen more of it than you have. So you should be able to take that and go, "Okay, let's explore this." Because if you do it down the road, you might not have a problem. Where if you ignore it a year or two down the road, you might end up standing in those exact shoes going, "Oh, I should have dealt with this before."
hmm Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so kind of leaning into that a little bit, and from your perspective, what separates a well-run building from one that's just constantly reactive?
I almost swore there. I'm sorry. Just like just like giving a darn, like
You can
having
swear, you can
uh
swear, Sean. It's okay.
like giving a crap about it, like having the ownership behind it. Like if you have operators who feel good coming to work, they feel acknowledged, they're going to care about what they do and they're going to put their stamp on it. If you spend any time on social media and you're following like any sort of tradie accounts, there's always that joke about driving around with your tradie dad and him going, "I built that house," or like, "I worked on that."
Mm,
Um, those guys care about what they do. And when you can hire operations teams, property managers, vendors that have that mentality, it comes through. They care. Like I still walk by Harbor Center and I go, "I remember cleaning that grill from the generator," or like, "I remember when we changed the generator." And like I really cared at the time and I still care now
mm,
because it's somebody's gonna have to repair that one day, change it out, and I don't want them using my name as a swear word.
mm.
I want them to be like, "Oh, that guy knew what he was doing." There's a
Yeah.
level of pride that is involved with it.
Yeah, and that's just it, taking pride in your work, being able to, hang your hat on something, and it's not even ego, it's just being proud of it, right? And I think that speaks volumes. So,
Yeah, I mean, if
um,
if an artist can be proud of a painting, why can't
mm,
I be proud of a clean mechanical room or a project that went off without a hitch?
yeah. Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's so funny because that made me think about driving around town with so our CEO Dave Nate and our managing partner Heinrich. Um, for a variety of reasons, sometimes we'll be driving around together towards a site meeting or something like that, and it's hilarious. They've both been in the industry, over 20 years, and so driving down the road, they're like, "Oh, we worked on that one. We did this building, blah blah blah," and it's like it kind of opens your eyes. It's like, wow, our footprint all over the city is pretty vast, and it's nice hearing them talk about it because, like you said, there's definitely a sense of pride that goes into it. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
um, so just lingering on that last question, just in regard to building performance, what are from your perspective, what are some early warning signs that a building is heading in the wrong direction?
I mean, your service requests are going to be the biggest one. Um, and talking to your custodial staff. If
Mm,
your custodians start flagging that, hey, our soap dispensers seem to be failing, or I noticed this, like really paying attention to the little details. Um, you're going to always do your rounds. You're going to inspect building performance. You're going to look at lighting controls. There's always an initiative out there to reduce greenhouse gases and energy
hmm
consumption. But when you start to see things get a little bit more dirty, a little bit more wear and tear,
hmm
it's a good indicator that you might need a little bit more upkeep, or you might need to look at what else is being affected.
Yeah.
Um, when you start having little fires everywhere,
hmm
the knee-jerk reaction is to often put the fires out.
hmm
I find when you get operations teams, property managers, and developers that will put those fires out, but then set aside time to wonder where the sparks are coming from, those guys are the ones that are really successful. You
hmm
know, looking at trends, currently we're working on a program that's tracking all of our emergency on call at, call it like a 5,000 foot level. So I can take a snapshot over a year and see like, oh, and shoulder months we have recurring HVAC issues. Okay, well, let's
hmm
look if we can mitigate that later on. So collecting your data, analyzing your data, and looking at it from a lens of how do we mitigate these types of calls generally causes the building to perform better.
Yeah.
And you avoid falling into that trap of where you're only dealing with the symptom of the problems.
Yeah. 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 And that, so, and because from your perspective, you actually kind of you have an interesting dynamic because you sit right in the middle of operators, PMs, contractors, right?
Correct.
So where do you see the biggest disconnect between those groups when projects are happening?
What comes to mind is the understanding of the systems.
Mm,
You'll have an asset manager that will interview a prospective tenant. They'll lease a space, or they'll have questions, and it's, oh, do you have the capacity to do X? And the asset manager goes, let me find out. And then it creates this long chain of questions and back and forth that is appropriate and should happen.
hmm
But often I find the disconnect is like the deep understanding.
hmm
So something I've working on pushing and that I really enforce people doing is kind of the cross learning and collaboration. Like you
mm
can take your asset manager, your property manager, and your operator and walk through the building and play the
hmm
question and answer game. Everybody becomes a little bit more informed, reduces that disconnect, and helps with the understanding when the operator goes, hey, we got an issue here, we're going to have to deal with it. The PM, the asset manager, and other parties involved are already going to have a base level understanding, and it's going to reduce the questions, minimize the back and forth, and hopefully expedite a solution.
Yeah. Yeah. It's refreshing to hear you say that because you'd be surprised how often that solution is overlooked. And it's just, hey, get every single stakeholder here. Let's have a meeting. Let's walk through it. Let's evaluate it together and get on the same page.
Yeah,
It's overlooked, and I'm sure you've seen it for sure. And this is again, going back to what we said about the relationship piece, right? Um, it shouldn't be hard to track these people down, right? It shouldn't be hard to come to a solution. And if you're feeling resistance, that's almost, a bit of a red flag, I would think. So
totally. And you get different perspectives.
exactly. Yeah. Well, and like
I
you said, like contractors should be people that are willing to educate and, masters in their craft. So why wouldn't you want that person there helping you to find a solution on scene, right?
Absolutely. And having somebody who might not have as the same depth of understanding look at it and go, well, what about this?
Yeah.
You know, I'm constantly reminded of an emergency call I had probably 4 years ago. Building was flooding. Could not
Mm.
figure out why. I showed up and there was water pouring out of the drip trays of fan coils.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
It was warm out. I and as an operator, I'm going like, okay, let's protect the most expensive equipment first. So I'm shutting down chillers, making sure pumps aren't. they're not cavitating or pushing pressure against valves that might be accidentally closed. Building was still flooding. I could not
Yeah.
figure out why. Called our PM, didn't know a lot about those mechanical systems, came down, and the first thing she does is she looks and goes, "Are the drain pipes frozen?" And I just kind of went, uh, maybe. Sure enough, what had happened
Wow.
was it
Yeah.
was so cold for weeks before that the parkade slabs had like retained so much cold that it was freezing the water in the drain pipes as it went through the slab. But it was the ambient air temperature was +4 or +5. So all the snow and ice on the roof was melting, going down the drain pipes, getting stopped by a block of ice, backing up through the lowest point, which just so happened to be the drain pans of fan coils. That perspective of such a simple way of looking at it
Yeah.
completely was missed by me because I was so focused on the mechanical systems that I deal with day to day.
Right.
So, because of that and her recommendation, we now wrap all of our drain pipes in and around the concrete slabs with heat trace.
So you can avoid that moving forward. So it's that perspective not only solved the problem, but it also mitigated future catastrophe from happening, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So, kind of shifting gears here, and it kind of speaks to what we deal with, obviously, is, building renewal capital projects. So, just from your experience, what's one mistake you see happen before a project even starts that creates problems later?
Not understanding the end user's expectations and interface with what you're doing.
Yeah. That expectation alignment is big, hey? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my expectation in operations or my understood expectation of an owner is going to be different than the person in the space. So really trying to figure out like how does the environment work when I'm not standing here and looking at the problems that can occur and how you're going to do your project to best, mitigate damage and create like a better end user experience.
Yeah. 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 And that's, yeah, I mean, you nailed it. Again, we have a presentation piece which is entirely about that expectation alignment and just because like it's geared towards property managers, building owners, but quite often they find themselves as a pivot point between so many stakeholders, and that can get away from you really quick. We were just in a lunch and learn, and a story came up where someone was talking about they were involved in this, multi-million-dollar roofing project for one of their buildings. What ended up happening is two of their services or contractor and an engineer, I think it was, they were starting to communicate directly and not including the property manager in those communications. So you're just left scrambling, right? And so even beyond that, and it distills back to what was the expectation set? Were you supposed to be basically the filter for all communication so that way you know that you're in the loop? Maybe you don't need to be in it for all of it, but especially for some of the topics that they were talking about, it's, decisions were being made, that person was left out of the loop. Suddenly that's just gonna lead to a bit of disaster. So
Oh, absolutely. And it just creates a frictionless relationship.
yeah, yeah, 100%. So, so now that you're leading teams, Sean, what makes a great building operator today versus an average one?
Empathy.
Mm,
I know that's cliche and I know it's a buzzword used, but I think back to some of the old operators that I worked with. They just they didn't care too much about the end user. They cared that the system was working as designed. A good
mhm,
operator, at least nowadays that I see, cares. Like they care that the tenant or the public have an issue or something they've identified with this, and really just being empathetic to their position, trying to
mm,
understand where they're coming from. That doesn't mean you're going to make them absolutely happy and solve all their problems, but
mhm,
accounting for that does make a big difference.
mhm. Yeah. 100%. Yeah, empathy. That's a word that I keep hearing more and more, and I don't think it's cliche. I think that it's important, right?
Yeah.
Um, so for you, what do you kind of look for in someone who's joining your team?
Um, how they fit with the team.
Mm,
Like I said previously, like we all kind of do the same thing. Like we all make sure the building is run. We all make sure that the tenants are comfortable, that our costs are down, that we're being efficient. But how they work as a team is
yeah,
to me the most important thing.
yeah,
If they don't work well in the team, then they lose access to resources, feedback, support, and those are all the things that take a good person and make them a great person because you can't do it all by yourself. Um, and if you try to, you're going to end up old, stressed out, probably in an early grave, and not liking life. So, like how they fit in the team, like do they care? Do they take a
yeah.
vested interest in their colleagues? Are they happy when they show up at work? Those type of things.
Yeah. Well, hey, I will say, I've been to the low tide office now a couple times, but the very first time I went, I can always get a sense of a culture of a company based on how they treat someone who is waiting to meet someone else in the office. And what I mean by that is I was sitting in the kitchen because that's kind of, the first landing for your office. I was meeting you and I was meeting Fido. I had three different people come up and just ask, "Hey, are you all good? Like, do you know who you're meeting? Can I get you anything? Do you want a water or a coffee?" I had three different people ask me that within the 90 seconds that I was waiting for you guys. So,
That's awesome.
um, yeah, you get a sense of, okay, this is a really tight-knit culture, and there is that layer of just, um, uh, what's the word? Like, yeah, just like there's like a gracious touch to it, I guess. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's one thing that stands out. I've worked for Low Tide coming up on 8 years, and from day one, I felt like people cared, like genuinely cared.
Mm, mm,
And when you feel that you're genuinely cared about, you will instinctively start to genuinely care.
yeah,
And it's reciprocal. And then like I said, it bleeds into when you have people come into the office, when you deal with vendors, when you deal with your colleagues' families, like you just start to care more.
yeah.
And there's really no negative. Like I haven't
No,
found one yet.
yeah, yeah. No, 100%. Okay, so a couple more questions for you here. So first one, a little bit more broad. So zooming out, where do you think building operations are heading over the next few years?
I don't I don't know if I have a direct answer to that. I think it's
Hmm.
just going to be ever evolving with AI kind of becoming more and more prevalent, and the ability for it to be used to take away some of the, I'd call them mundane tasks or very repetitive tasks. I think that's a bonus that's going to free up a lot more time for operations to lean into that caring and being more creative, looking at creative solutions, having the time and space and capacity to sit down and look at it from a higher level.
Yeah.
I do think the industry is going to suffer from staffing.
Mm,
I
mm,
think a lot of people still think of trades and operations as not as popular or glitz and glam as, say, a white collar job.
hmm.
That is unfortunately not true. I wouldn't trade my career for anything.
Hmm.
And maybe winning the lottery and retiring at a fishing village, but that's a tall order. I think that operations, they're going to have to evolve. Staffing is going to be a hard thing to do because attracting people into this industry has always seemed rather difficult.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then just kind of remaining adaptable, which again, a bit of a buzzword, but things change so fast. Technologies change, ideas change, environments change. So remaining adaptable and a bit malleable with that stuff is going to be the biggest hurdle for some. And
Hmm.
it's going to be an advantage when teams can do it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then I guess, just from would you say, last thing on that, would you say expectations for building operations or building operators, is that getting higher, do you think?
No, I think the expectation is becoming a little bit more uniform of that. Like we're looking for people who like what they do. It's not a stepping stone because one of the things I found with operations is a large part of it is stewardship. You take
Mm,
all this time to know the building. If you don't stick around to utilize that knowledge, you're never getting to that next stage where you can start being more creative and looking at problems a different way.
mhm. Well, Sean, this has been great. Really, really appreciate you
Thank you.
sharing your perspective. I think, one thing that's really clear is just how much goes on behind the scenes and building operations that most people never see. And even beyond that, what are some of the practices that make that a successful endeavor, right? But ultimately, all those things have a huge impact on how buildings perform day to day. So before we wrap, just wanted to give you the floor. Any final thoughts or advice you'd leave for property managers, owners, or teams that are listening to this?
Yeah. Happy people do better work. Focusing on your team being happy at work is a tall order and definitely not something that's super achievable all the time. But if you can have more good days than you can bad, people will do better work. And the trickle down effect is that tenants are happier, revenues are up, costs are down, and they look forward to coming to a space, whether it's what they do for work or where they work, that they enjoy.
Love that. Really appreciate that insight. Okay. So, Sean, thank you so much again for taking the time. Thank you to everyone for tuning in to Building Better. Well, guys, we'll see you next episode. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.